In this video, you'll be learning about this topic.
So I'm a little speechless. And the thing that kind of comes to my mind immediately when you start talking about some of these technologies and these ideas, when I think about the credit card payment system, it's the ultimate Rube Goldberg machine of clearing, of cost and people in this big long line of events that have to take place before, when a person swipes a credit card to the business receiving the payment, there's all this friction that has to take place to clear that. And when I think about what you just described, to me, it sounds like it's just going to decapitate that entire process. Is that a good assumption? Tell me where I'm off the mark. Is that what's actually taking place?
It is, yeah. And I think the global remittance is a great place to start. I mean, we have so much ambition here with Strike, and it's really exciting. Let me tell you a really fascinating story that's going to put this into a lot of context and allow people to relate. So there's a payment standard in India known as the UPI, the Unified Payments Interface. This was a standard that was mandated by the government itself. So that alone is a really impressive accomplishment. But UPI is now huge. It does like all of the payments within the country. It's massive. Every merchant just lists this one standard singular QR code, and all of these different apps can remain interoperable with it and allow consumers and merchants and different services to integrate. Now, the story has it, there's a company, Paytm, in India, one of the biggest fintech companies of all time at one point. They were valued at $10 billion privately. Berkshire Hathaway was an investor. They were absolutely massive. They initially launched in 2010. They had over 100 million active users. To give you context, the Cash App has 50 million users, and obviously not all of those are active. They had over 100 million active, 320 million registered. And they're like the biggest thing since sliced bread, right? They had created the equivalent of Cash App or Venmo here in the United States. They had created a private network and created these standards to allow folks of India to perform financial services. Now, when the government mandated a standard, that is the equivalent of what I'm trying to draw of Bitcoin. Now, all of a sudden, there was an open standard. There was a singular QR code, and the government mandated you remain interoperable with it. What Paytm did, it was against their best interest to switch from their standard to the open standard. Because with the open standard, now I'm sacrificing market share. Now some kid who's building for his art fair can build a wallet that integrates with UPI, and they can use his instead of ours. So it's in our best interest to keep people in our achieved network effect and not let anyone be interoperable with our standard. Like Cash App users can't pay Venmo users. PayPal would never allow that. But now that the government mandated this more open standard, all of a sudden this company, Paytm, went from number one, like in the world, but especially in India, to 3 years later, the third most valuable payments company in India. And the reason was obvious. You cannot compete with an open network. It's going to absolutely swallow you whole. This company, Paytm, could not possibly put enough engineers on payroll, enough salespeople recruiting merchants to compete with an open standard. I mean, everyone in India was building against this thing that the government had mandated, and they were toast. And I think the same thing is going to happen with Bitcoin, is that this is an open monetary network. And the PayPals and the Squares, what PayPal did is they allowed you to speculate on the asset, but God forbid they allow you to withdraw even to a Bitcoin address, because they would then be interoperable with this open standard. And if a PayPal merchant had a Bitcoin address, who's to say I would use the PayPal wallet to pay it? Why wouldn't I use Strike? Why wouldn't I use Cash App? Why wouldn't I use Coinbase? Why wouldn't I use my little cousin who built a Lightning Network wallet in his free time because he looks up to me? I could use millions of different wallets, millions of different services. So it's against their best interest. PayPal is deathly scared of Bitcoin, the network. Bitcoin, the asset, they're going to let people speculate on. They're going to charge basis points for. Bitcoin, the network, they are purposefully not allowing. Square has not enabled a Bitcoin QR code at merchants. Who's to say I'm going to use Cash App to pay it? And so what I think, though, is that these companies don't have a choice. And in 2 to 3 years, companies like Strike, who our approach is anyone who remains interoperable, there's probably people competing and copying me night and day. And that's a great thing. More people, if someone copies me and launches in Australia, awesome. Now Strike users can send to Australia and Australia can send back, right? Like there's so much innovation on this open network, and it's going to absolutely swallow these private monetary systems whole. And I think it's going to happen much sooner. And so this little snapshot of what happened in India, I think can be applied to this global scale. And, Bitcoin QR codes, Lightning QR codes are going to be the unified standard. How long will that take? I'm not sure. But if the efficiencies are there and the market opportunity is there, someone's going to do it. And I want to be that guy. And so I think that's a really interesting story, and it really puts it into context and allows people to relate to, it more or less has happened already, just on a smaller scale.
So what becomes the business strategy for Squares and PayPals when it's so disruptive, what we're talking about? But at the same time, it's not like it's going to be anything they're going to be able to stop, because like you say, people like yourself and many others are going to step in and continue to supply this network to the global population. So where do companies like Square and PayPal go from here?
I don't know. That's a question for them.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on the next podcast episode and new investing resources.
What are your takeaways and thoughts on this discussion? Let us know in the comments section below.